What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to my channel, Runs Reviews. Sorry for the wait, but we are back. Hope everybody's doing well, and it's time to drop another one. Today we're gonna be having Hood Classic. Everybody know this movie, Friday, the original Friday. And I thought about it. I was like, let me get a little change of pace. The first review that I did was a comedy. It was a comedy action. This one is more of a just straight comedy. You know what I'm saying? Like Friday will have you laughing like through and through. And it got so many memorable, quotes that we still use today, And so let's get into it. If you like the channel, just like and subscribe, and you never know where this can go. So let's get into it though today. And I'm out here exercising, getting my little walk on. I said, let me be creative with this, give me a little exercise and, do something at the same time and just go ahead and, pick up the camera. So like I said, let's get into it. So here we are, the original Friday. We back in South Central LA, and you could, like I said, you can notice the theme of my reviews. They all take place in LA pretty much. So, the next one we'll probably switch it up, but we right back here in South Central LA, right? And first of all, the movie opens up with like a montage. You could hear some music, and it's the opening credits. And what they're doing is basically going from room to room. They're going from room to room, and they're showing like the different cast members just off the back. We could see they're showing like Willie Jones, which is played by John Witherspoon, but his name is Willie Jones in this movie. They basically showing him and his wife. Now his wife, I always forget her real name, but I basically know her as D. Everybody kind of know her as D as being the security guard on the Wayans brothers. And so that's what I kind of always knew her as. Like, I ain't never just really got, I know, of course I could look it up, but I ain't never just like, thought to call her by her real name. I always call her by D. And so we could see them going into their room, John Witherspoon and D, which is his wife in this movie. And then we could see them going into Regina King's room, and she's basically like she's going to sleep, but she's basically trying to protect her because she just got her hair done. So she's actually like sleeping in her hand because she don't want to touch the pillow. So you can see that, like, it's like as she nods off, she tries to make sure that she don't have anything to do with touching that pillow, right? So I think a lot of females could probably relate to that, especially back in the day. I mean, these days you probably just wear a bonnet or something like that, but she was really trying to protect her hair. So we get Regina King, and then the camera pans to Craig's room, which is played by Ice Cube in this movie, which is our main star, one of our main stars. So we get to his room, right? And so it basically it shows Craig, which is Ice Cube. It shows Craig going into the refrigerator, and it's morning time, and he's basically just trying to get something to eat, but he's going into the refrigerator, and soon as he closes the refrigerator, as soon as he closes the door, we greeted by Willie Jones, which, like I said, is John Witherspoon in this movie. And so he started going into his dialogue. Everybody know what he says. He said, every time I'm in the kitchen, you in the kitchen, eating up, all the food, all the hog maw, all of that. He gets into all of that, right? Everybody know that line. And he was like, I might want some pig feet. I might, basically trying to call Craig out for always being in the refrigerator and, always eating up the food, basically, So we could tell off the back that Craig is obviously like, living with his parents, because Willie Jones is his dad, so he's living with his parents, and, they basically, kind of getting tired of him, I guess, kind of smooching around, and he's a grown man. Keep in mind, Craig is pretty much a grown man in this movie. He probably in his I would say his early 20s, but he's grown enough to, I guess, have his own thing going. So they're basically getting, he's basically, you could tell Willie Jones done kind of had enough of that, and just tired of him being in the refrigerator and just eating up the food and stuff that he probably done bought. So basically after that, he was Craig was really trying to get some cereal. He was trying to eat some cereal, but he noticed there wasn't no milk in the refrigerator. And I think we done all been there before, right? You trying to pour a bowl of Lucky Charms or something like that, and you ain't got enough milk to finish, the bowl. Now, what it was with Craig, he poured a big bowl of cereal, and it probably was just too big. He probably would have had, I don't know, the milk was kind of shiesty. It was pretty much out, so. But what he should have noticed was that, ain't enough milk for the cereal that he was pouring, So anyways, I digress. Basically, when he found out it wasn't enough milk for his cereal, Willie Jones was basically telling him, you better put some water on that damn shit. Basically, telling him like, hey, you gonna eat that cereal, you better, make do. Basically, old school mentality right there. Telling him to put water on some cereal. So we get greeted by D, which is like I said, I always call her D. But basically his mother in this movie, we get greeted by her. She's fixing her some breakfast, right? She got her some leftover pork chops, and she fixing her some eggs and stuff like that. And Craig over here thinking that he getting ready to get hooked up with some breakfast. But no, not in her mind. This breakfast is for her. She ain't fixing this for Craig. Like I said, Craig is a grown man. Basically like he could get his own. So that's basically how she treated him. So yeah, so she's fixing breakfast, and Craig kind of they started kind of having a conversation, and it was basically about Craig getting fired from his job, and that was kind of a running theme throughout the movie, like Craig getting fired from his job. So he got fired from his job like just recently, probably the day before or whatever, and Craig was really trying to reassure to his mother, like, hey, you didn't tell my dad, that I got fired, right? And she basically lied to him. She said, no, I didn't tell him, you safe. And soon as she says that to him, Willie calls him back. Willie Jones calls him back there to the bathroom. And this man right here, like I said, a character he is. This man is basically on the toilet taking the shit, right? And Craig was like, I'll wait till you come out. But, Willie was like, no, you better come in here. I smelled your shit for, when you was a baby for all these years. You can smell mine for 5 minutes. That's basically what he was telling Craig, right? So he invites Craig into the bathroom. And that's when, he lets Craig know that he found out that, he had got fired from his job. So, basically, like I said, his mother, basically told him a story that his dad didn't know. So, he tells Craig to pick up a newspaper or, an article that, about jobs. And it was an article about him being like a dog catcher, basically working for the city pound. And so Craig, of course, right away, he was like, I ain't trying to be no dog catcher, because that's basically what Willie Jones do. That's his profession. He goes around catching loose, stray dogs and, bring them into the pound. So he's trying to get Craig to do it, just to, have a job. Craig says, no, I think in that situation, if you in Craig's shoes, you probably would have just, even if you didn't really want to do it, you probably would have just said yes, just to avoid the conflict. I mean, because think about it. You staying with your parents. So, when they try to offer you a job that, somebody's willing to hire you on, you almost want to take it just to, at least keep the peace. But Craig wasn't even thinking like that. Craig was like, nah, I ain't trying to be no dog catcher. And Willie was like, why not? And, Craig to my well, he don't even like dogs. And Willie over here to my well, that's the beauty of it. You could get a dog, take him, and, bang, 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 right up his ass. Just that type of, the classic John Witherspoon lines and stuff. And so, but he basically tell Craig, like, hey, as long as you live in this house, you're going to work, which is the right thing to do. You grown. He said, you either going to work or you going to go to school. But it ain't going to be no just laying around, having us, feed you all day and we taking care of you. Nah. So he tells Craig the right thing, like, you know, at that age, like, you know, hey, if you don't get no job, you ain't got to worry about, you know, catching no dog. You got to worry about a dog catching your ass, you know, basically saying that he gonna be on the streets, you know, if he don't get no job. So we get through that, and keep in mind he was on the toilet the whole time. Willie was on the toilet the whole time taking a shit, you know, which was really cold. He could have waited till he got out, but I'm talking about he in there spraying in there. He's spraying the whole can of air freshener just to, you know, talk to Craig the whole time. But hey, he got his point across. So meanwhile, we get introduced to my next our co-star, which is Smokey. Smokey is played by Chris Tucker in this movie, one of my favorite actor. You know, you already know from Money Talks, my review. I love Chris Tucker's work. You know, funny, naturally funny guy. He just had that voice that, you know, you just gravitate to. Anything he says is gonna be funny just because of the way he's saying it. So yeah, we get introduced to Smokey, which he basically comes through Craig's bedroom window and damn near breaking the curtains just to do it. He you know, we get introduced to him, and Craig immediately, now keep this in mind because this will be important, you know, later on in the movie. Craig immediately pulls out a gun on Smokey. I'm talking about a real gun. He pulls out a pistol on Smokey and says, like, you better watch what you're doing, you know, coming through his window like that. And then Smokey was like, what you gonna do? Like, you know, he basically pointed the gun at him and said, I'm, you know, blast you with this. And he was like, where you get that? Smokey was like, where you get that gun? He was in Craig, you know, jokingly saying, you know, your mama. And so, so basically, you know, like we could see like the type of friendship that, you know, Craig and Smokey has. You know, they real cool with each other, you know, just, you know, you could tell there's a lot of playing and a lot of joking going on. So basically Craig tells Smokey that, you know, he got fired, and he got fired on his day off. Keep in mind, like, this is the deal. Then, like I said, this is the running theme throughout the whole movie. This man got fired on his day off. Now, you know, we ain't never heard of that, right? Usually when you get fired, you come in, you know, maybe they have you work like half of the day, then they let you go. You know how they do. You know, they try to get some work out of you before they let you go. But they let you go in that day that you actually came in. This man got fired on his day off. He didn't even come in, and basically I guess they called him to let him know that he got fired. And you wouldn't even believe the reason why he got fired. Craig gets fired for stealing boxes. We don't know, like, and this is allegedly, right? They said that they got him on the camera stealing boxes. And we going like, okay, what is he stealing boxes for? And even Smokey was going like, what was you trying to do, build a clubhouse? And it's like, you know, it's a good question. Cause I'm like, how you get, first of all, how you get fired on your day off? And then what you doing, you know, stealing some damn boxes. You know what I'm saying? It's just a goofy way to get fired all the way around. So, anyways, when we get through all that, and, you know, they start Smokey kind of making fun of, you know, Craig not having a job now and all that stuff. We get a flashback. We immediately get a flashback, and it's about Red. It's about a guy named Red, which is played by DJ Pooh. It's played by DJ Pooh in this movie. And so we get Red, you know, DJ Pooh, aka Red. He's basically coming up to the block to confront Debo. And Debo is basically the neighborhood bully. He's played by Tiny what's his name? Tiny Lister, Zeus Lister, whatever his name is. Everybody know who I'm talking about. Big guy, big swole guy. Got the, you know, the eye going on and stuff. Like, you know, everybody know he's passed away. You know, RP Tiny. But Tiny, I'm gonna just call him Tiny Lister. But basically that's who Debo is played by. So, you know, we all know what he looked like. You know, big guy, you know, big bodybuilder looking guy. And basically Red was approaching him and confronting him about that Debo had, you know, had his bike. Debo had took his bike, and basically he wanted his bike back. But you could tell out the back, you know, Red is kind of, you know, intimidated by Debo. You know what I'm saying? Like he's basically intimidated by him. And he don't really, because he keep on, like, soon as he got out the car, he gets out the car, and his dad, you know, brought him up there in this small, like, Ford car. I forgot exactly what the model is, but brought him up there in this small Ford car. And so he approaches his Debo, and he's immediately looking back like he expecting somebody to help him, you know, like he expecting his dad to help him or whatever, but he's expecting some help. He's scared of Debo. And so he basically goes on talking about, hey, you know, can I get the, you know, the beach cruiser, which is the bike that he had. And like, you know, I would like to, you know, get my beach cruiser back. You know, the beach cruiser, the one I let you borrow. And you know, Red over here even saying stuff like, well, hey, we could act like it's both of ours, you know. I mean, he don't really want nothing to do with Debo. Like I said, he's scared of Debo. He's scared to ask for the bike back, but he does. And so, you know, they playing dice. It's like Smokey, he was playing dice. Debo and they had their own little group over there. They basically having a dice game. And so, Debo was like, yeah, you could come get the bike, homie. It's over here. You know, so Red, you know, he thinking like, okay, I'm finna get my bike back. You know, that was more, you know, easier than I thought. Shit. Now, Debo turned around and gave him the hardest uppercut I've ever seen. Now, I'm talking about the uppercut was so hard that Red damn near, like, you know, flew up to the power lines and shit. Like, you know, I'm talking about, like, he punched Debo, he punched Red so damn hard that, I mean, like, you know, you ain't never seen a human, like, fly that far up in the air. And so, he came back down to the ground, and Smokey, of course, you know, delivered the famous line, you know, that everybody know, you got knocked the fuck out, you know, like, and it was just everybody laughing at him. And, you know, Red, actually, Red's dad get out the car, and he was saying, I don't know why you come down here messing with these people. And Debo even tried to threaten his dad, like, you want some of this too, old man? Huh? And Red's dad pointed his fingers at Debo and said, no. And then he gets back in the car, right? He gets back in the car, and, you know, you could tell he just, you know, looks defeated. He didn't get his bike back, you know. So we could see that, you know, what Debo is on. Debo is basically, let me cross the street here. Debo is basically the neighborhood bully. Like, you know, he goes around, you know, basically just threatening people and trying to, you know, take their stuff, you know, trying to take whatever they got. So, you know, that's what he be on. So we get that flashback of Red trying to get his bike back. And so, anyways, meanwhile, Smokey, we get back to, you know, back from the flashback, and Smokey and Craig, they sit on the porch in front of Craig's house. And so they're just like, you know, just sitting, hanging out on the porch, you know, and they noticing like people pass by, you know, going down the street, and they notice girl named Debbie, which is played by Nia Long in this movie. You know, this is prime Nia Long, and, you know, Nia Long was looking good, and, you know, she was still looking good, had the short hair, fit, you know, everything like that. And so, yeah. So they get approached by, not really approached, but they see Debbie passing by. She's basically working out, jogging, and she's passing the house. And, you know, they staring at her, you know, talking about some, hey, you know, and, you know, you could tell that they, you know, two young men that's just, you know, they just trying to get some type of action. You know what I'm saying? Like, you could tell, like, especially Smokey. Smokey just really, like, you know, gone. Like, he just be making, like, these faces and, like, you know, just doing things like these expressions with, you know, with his face when he see, like, women that he like. And so, yeah, we see Debbie going down the street. And we see a little shortly after that, we see Craig's actual girl show up. She shows up in a car, and she's bumping some 2 Live Crew. Basically, bumping some 2 Live Crew, Hoochie Mama. She bumping that, right? And that's what starts playing when she roll up, because she's wearing like these short shorts, and she got this like this short top on, you know what I'm saying? So she basically, like, you could tell that, you know, she fast, you know, she is like, you know, she kind of on some hoish, you know, type of shit. So she basically approaches Craig, and it was like early on, like in the movie, before she even got there, she was calling the house and hanging up. She was just calling the house and hanging up, and, you know, trying to get to Craig, and, you know, her mother would answer the phone, you know, Craig's mother would answer the phone, and she would just, you know, hang up. And so, you know, basically she was doing that, I guess, because she had found out that Craig had went to some type of like concert or something like that with another female. And so, you know, she basically jealous, you know, or basically, you know, mad about that. And so yeah, she pulls up and she confronts Craig about that. And Craig takes her in the house, and you probably know what happened after that. So you know, meanwhile we get introduced to Felicia. Yeah, we get introduced to Felicia. Now Felicia is like I guess you could call her a crackhead. I think a lot of people would try to call her a crackhead. We never seen her doing crack in this movie, but she has like a dirty appearance, you know what I'm saying? Like, you could tell like she ain't bathing. She looked like she, you know, like she musty and stink, like, you know, just everything. Like, Felicia don't look clean at all. So we get approached by her, and out of all the things she asked Smokey for to borrow, she basically asked Smokey if she could borrow his car. You know what I'm saying? And even Smokey was surprised by that. Like, you know, most people want to borrow sugar, you know, like, you know, or something like that. You want to borrow my car? And now in 2025, I guess that ain't uncommon. You know, somebody to kind of ask for your car and, you know, borrow your car. I guess you wouldn't be too much surprised. But back then it was kind of like, nah, you want to borrow my car? Nah. So, you know, you out of there. So yeah, she asked for out of all the things that she asked for, she asked to borrow the man's car, Smokey's car. So we also we get introduced to another character in this movie, and his name is Big Worm. Big Worm is played by Faison Love. And, you know, keep in mind, these two people, you know, they was in Money Talks together. Chris Tucker and Faison Love, you know, back in that jail scene, they was in that together. So here's, you know, and this was before Money Talks. So we could tell the history kind of goes on between these two. But we get introduced to Big Worm, played by Faison Love. And Big Worm is basically he's basically a weed dealer. He sells weed. And so he just making his rounds, and he trying to make sure, you know, Smokey is basically selling weed for Big Worm. So he's trying to make sure, you know, Smokey is on it. And he could tell, like, Smokey ain't, like, you know, basically, like, he even says, like, you know, he's having a hard time selling the weed. And, you know, he said, you know, he's basically saying, you know, niggas are broke these days. They ain't trying to, you know, basically, they ain't trying to buy no weed from him. And Big Worm was like, I don't think you applying yourself, Smokey. You know, you ain't trying hard enough, you know, to sell this weed for me. So, so we get that little exchange. So we meet Big Worm and we see what he on. So we get Red. Keep in mind, Red was the one that got knocked out by Debo trying to get his bike back. We get Red to approach the porch. And Craig come back outside from dealing with his girl. And so they back sitting on the porch. And like I said, we get Red to approach them. And so Red basically was he come there in some sunglasses, right? Because he trying to hide the Red got a big black eye from the knockout that Debo gave him. And so soon after that, you know, they kind of laughing at making fun of Red's black eye. And even Smokey was like, put your shades back on, you know, you look bad. So so we get Debo that come out of nowhere, and he comes on Red bike. Keep in mind, he got this squeaky bike, and it's like every time Debo approaches, you hear this music, that's like the Jaws music. Like if anybody, watched the movie Jaws about the shark attacks, they always played that music, when Jaws would, be around. And so they played that music, basically when Debo was approaching. And so he gets up to the porch. Debo gets to the porch on Red's bike. And like I said, Debo is known for jacking people. Like whatever you got on, if he see anything that he like, he gonna try to take it from you. So before Debo even really get to the porch, they trying to hide everything. Smokey trying to hide everything. Craig trying to hide his stuff, whatever he got. And Red had on this chain. He had on this gold chain. And instead of taking it off and putting his, trying to hide it, put it in his pocket or something, he just tucks it in. Like he just be like, I'm gonna tuck mine in. And so Red tucks his chain in, and that don't matter to Debo. Debo basically snuff Red out, and he takes Red's chain. I mean, it's like, man, I already took the man bike. Now you taking his chain away from him. And so he takes Red's chain, right? And you could tell Red is just, he's immediately like distraught about that. He is just like it done destroyed him. And he just shaking his head back and forth like, like my grandmama gave me that chain, which was a famous quote. Everybody still kind of use that to this day. Like I said, this movie got so many memorable quotes in it, that we still, laugh at about today. But he was like, yeah, my grandmama gave me that chain. And, he didn't try to put up a fight for it or nothing. He just let Debo take it and snatch it off of him. And so, we get another memorable quote when Debo leaves with Red's chain. He Red, basically go back to his car and he's crying. He's basically crying about the chain that that Debo took from him. And Smokey was like, he gonna cry in the car. And we, like I said, we still use that to this day. We be like, well, he gonna cry in the car. We could be looking at somebody that's sad or something like that, or they looking like they about to cry, and they might be actually in their car, and then they be like, oh, well, he gonna cry in the car. So that's basically what Smokey had said as Red was, getting ready to pull off. Like I said, he was actually crying in the car about the chain. So anyways, Debo, this might be I'm kind of going off of the dome on this movie because Friday one of the movies we done watched so many times, you don't really need notes like that. But I'm trying to keep it, in order as much as I can too, y'all. But Debo basically, I guess he came back. I guess he he notices that Stanley, which is like the next door neighbor, Stanley keeps his, Stanley is basically this character that he don't believe that he lives in the hood. And Stanley thinks that he live in a nice area, but they in South Central LA, right? We know what goes on there. But he's basically Stanley he was leaving to go somewhere. And Stanley was leaving, he had left his window open. Like he had some burglar bars, and he left he left the window open, but he had some burglar bars. And of course, Debo, and known for stealing and jacking people, he notices that, and he asked Smokey to go in there with him and try to steal something. And so they basically go Smokey didn't want to do it, but of course everybody is scared of Debo because Debo's stature. He's a big guy, big swole guy. You know what I'm saying? Like everybody basically just intimidated by him. So him not really want to do it, he reluctantly go, and they go inside Stanley's house. They break inside Stanley's house through the window, and he even he was even telling Craig like, hey, if you hear somebody whistle, basically saying look out for us. And at first Craig didn't even want to do it, but like I said, Craig got intimidated into doing that. Like I said, everybody's scared of Debo. So they break into Stanley's house and basically steal $200. So they was able to get something. But what happened was, instead of splitting it, even though Smokey had broken there with him, instead of splitting it, he basically Debo basically keeps the money for himself. So Smokey did all that for nothing, even though he didn't even want to do it. but he did it for nothing because Debo didn't give him none of the money. So we get that to happen. Meanwhile, we got another character in this movie that everybody know. We look across the street, and who do we see watering the grass? We see Miss Parker. Everybody know Miss Parker. You know Miss Parker out there in them Daisy Dukes. You know, she watering the grass. You could tell that she trying to get everybody attention. The way she was like moving and watering the grass. She watering all slow. They playing like a little music in the background. But you know, she's basically like, you know, she trying to catch, you know, you could tell she trying to catch some attention. So yeah, they notices Miss Parker watering her grass, and you know, they just both stop and like dead in their tracks. You know, it's like every woman they see in this movie, they just stop and they act like they ain't never seen a woman before. You know what I'm saying? The way they be acting. But yeah, they stop and, you know, start looking, you know, staring at Miss Parker. And even Craig's mother come out there and notices, you know, how Miss Parker is watering the grass, and she go like, she ought to be ashamed of, you know, coming out there like that, you know. And this is how fake like that she tried to act. I'm talking about Craig's mother. She was like, hey girl, you know, talking to Miss Parker. She yelled across the street, hey girl. And then Miss Parker yelled back, you know, hey, how you doing? And then, you know, she talking about some fine. And then Miss Parker was like, call me when you get home. And you could tell, like, off the back how fake Craig's mother was like when she said, okay. Like, you know what I'm saying? She didn't have no intentions, you know, dealing with Miss Parker. You know, she was basically just talking shit behind, you know, Miss Parker back. So anyways, we get that little scene. And soon as Craig's mother was getting ready to leave for work, and that's when Smokey, that's when we get, you know, we get to him, you know, lighting up a joint, or he's attempting to light up a joint. And so and that's basically like what Smokey does. He, you know, Smokey smokes weed. You know, that's why they call him Smokey. Smokey smokes weed. And he was actually trying to get Craig to smoke. Craig don't smoke. Craig was like, you know, I don't smoke, you know, I drink. And so, you know how it is, you know, like when your homeboy trying to get you to smoke for the first time, like you kind of, you know, hesitate to do it, but you might end up doing it, you know, because, you know, I think, you know, a lot of people done been there. Everybody could kind of, I ain't gonna say everybody, but a lot of people could relate to like what Craig was kind of, you know, the position he was in. You know, Craig don't smoke, but, you know, he sees Smokey smoking all the time, and, you know, Smokey was like, hey, go ahead and hit it, you know, to go ahead and take a hit. And he finally gets Craig to take a hit, you know, the joint that, you know, that he got. And you know how it is when you smoke weed for the first time, you know, and even I could kind of relate to it. It's like when you smoke weed for the first time, you kind of start, like, it depends on where you at, I would say. You know, it depends on the environment that you in, but you might start kind of tripping out, you know what I'm saying, so to speak. You know, you might start kind of acting real funny because everything slows down drastically. And I'm talking about, like, you know, especially the first time you smoke weed. Everything, like, kind of slows down, and everything kind of gets a little, you know, like, you know, it's just different. You know, you start looking at things a little different. Your perception of time is different and everything. So, yeah, he smokes. And that's basically how Craig started acting. He started looking at, you know, Smokey like he got 3 heads and stuff, and, you know, started calling him, you know, funny looking, you know. And now, you know, Smokey was like, I might not shouldn't have let you hit the weed. But, you know, like I said, that's just how it is when you first smoke weed for the first time. You know, it's just real different. It's real different. So anyways, though, he gets Craig to smoke weed with him for the first time. And so that just sets off everything. And, you know, when you go into like the other Fridays after that, that's like, you know, that's Craig's thing to do now. You know, he went from not really wanting to smoke weed at all to that's all he, you know, think about. That's all he do. All he do is smoke weed. So anyways, after they get through smoking, and, you know, they were smoking to some Rick James, Mary Jane, you know, the classic song. They had that playing, you know, they were smoking weed to that. And so, we could see, another character in the movie. Like I said, we got a lot of them, but we could see another character in the movie, and his name is Hector. It's a, Hispanic guy named Hector, and he's, driving in a lowrider. And so Smokey is immediately turned off by Hector being, you know, even his presence just being around. You know, he don't like Hector even pulling up. And we can see why, because we have another flashback where we see where we basically see Hector, Smokey, and another homeboy, Hector's homeboy, and they all in the car. They all in Hector's car in the lowrider, and they smoking weed. But what Smokey didn't know was that Hector had laced the weed that they were smoking with PCP, you know, which is, you know, angel dust on the street, like, you know. But that's basically what it is. They laced it with angel dust. And so, you know, I've never did, like, you know, angel dust PCP or nothing like that. But obviously, you know, it has you acting, you know, very paranoid, like, you know, because what we see is as soon as Smokey take a big hit of the lace joint that they were smoking, he started just tripping all the way out. And I'm talking about, like, we see this man, we see Smokey get out of Hector's car, and he's in his underwear, like he's in his, like, I'm talking about, he wearing some briefs, some just tighty whities, and we see him basically going down the street, and he, like, you know, he kind of just, like, you know, touching himself and, you know, rolling on the ground and stuff. He acting like something is on him, and Hector and his friend just getting a kick out of it. I mean, they just, you know, having fun with it. And it's like, you know, even though there's some serious stuff, you know, you wouldn't want nobody to do you like that, you know. To me, I can see why he don't like Hector, because it's like, come on, bro, you gonna lace his blunt or his joint with PCP, and you never know, like, how people are gonna react to that, you know. And so obviously it had a negative reaction with Smokey, because we see Smokey in this pigeon coop. And I'm talking about, he in this pigeon coop acting like a bird, right? I mean, he over there, you know, just making bird sounds, acting like a bird, bro. So this is what this PCP did to him, you know. So don't do it, yeah. Don't do it. So that's the reason why he don't like Hector. And so anyways, we get from that flashback, and we could see Big Worm come back. And Big Worm this time is in an ice cream truck. You know, he using the ice cream truck as a front, you know. And side note here, when he pulls up in the ice cream truck, you know, basically to, you know, sell, you know, really to try to sell weed, but he was, you know, he had kids lining up, you know, in front of the ice cream truck trying to buy, you know, ice cream and candy from him. One of the kids that was at the ice cream truck was a young Megan Good. At that time, I don't think nobody really knew it, but everybody know now. You know, that was Megan Good, the girl that was in the hat. She was wearing the hat backwards, and like, you could hear her saying, like, you know, I hate him. You know, like, you know, that was basically her line in this movie, like, you know, because, you know, basically, like, Big Worm ain't interested in selling ice cream. He trying to sell weed. So, you know, he's basically ripping the kids off and stuff. Even the, you know, the guy, the boy that was trying to buy some nachos or some chili cheese fries or something like that, and he takes the boy's money. He just take the boy's money and don't give him anything. But meanwhile, like, during that interaction, when he calls Smokey to the ice cream truck, and he basically was like, hey, give me some weed, because a couple of people around the corner want to buy, you know, some 20s, you know, some dub sacks, you know. So Smokey had kind of, you know, said, like, hey, I sold the weed. I sold all the weed. And so Big Worm was like, okay, well, if you sold all the weed, you know, count me my money, you know. And so Smokey pulled out a stack of money, and I think it only ended up being $100. He even tried to, like, trick Big Worm and tried to flip the money over like he had more than that, but it was only, like, I think $100 that he counted in front of Big Worm. And so Big Worm was basically like, you know, that pissed Big Worm off. He like, hey, you know, where my money? You know, if you done sold all that weed, you should have more than $100. And so that's when Smokey actually tell the truth. He says that him and Craig, you know, was smoking, and they had, you know, basically smoked the weed, you know, basically smoked up all the weed. And, you know, that pisses off Big Worm even more, you know, naturally. So you could kind of, you know, see where Big Worm is coming from. So yeah, that pisses off Big Worm more. And basically, Big Worm, issued a threat. He was like, hey, if you don't have my money or my bud, he basically said he was gonna kill. He killing, both of them. He gonna kill Craig and Smokey. And keep in mind, Craig only hit like a little bit of the joint that he offered to that Smokey offered to him. So it ain't like Craig was just sitting around smoking Big Worm's weed. You know what I'm saying? So now you done got Craig in some trouble that he shouldn't even really be involved in. So that was just messed up. You know what I'm saying? To get him in that type of that deep of a shit. You know what I'm saying? Like we talking about this guy saying that he gonna kill him. So now you done got what's supposed to be your friend involved in something like that. And so even Craig is pissed off about that. Craig was like, hey, I didn't smoke all that weed with you. I only smoked a little bit of joint that you already had rolled up. We wasn't smoking all the weed. That was you smoking the weed. And so now we see the plot kind of forming. It's like now Smokey got to come up with this money for Big Worm, or basically Smokey gonna be dead, Smokey. And Craig too. He issued that threat to Craig too. So anyways, after that, we could see a scene where they get approached by Cameo. We get a cameo in this movie by Bernie Mac. Rest in peace, Bernie Mac. We get a cameo in this movie by Bernie Mac. And he basically approaches them, and he can see that they smoking weed, that they got weed, because Smokey over there rolling up as Bernie Mac approaching them. And so Bernie is like a preacher in this movie. He's like, you could tell he worked for the church. He had on a suit and stuff. So basically Bernie trying to get some weed. He trying to smoke with him, and Smokey basically turned him like, no, you can't smoke. You can't have no weed. Like, you didn't put in on this. Like, you cannot have none. And Bernie over here talking about, well, it's better to give than to receive. And I need something for my cataracts. And it's like, nope, you still not getting no weed. So basically we get Bernie that notices Miss Parker across the street. Miss Parker's still out there watering this damn grass, right? It's like she never did go inside. And like I said, she trying to get attention. We already know what's going on there. And so Bernie notices Miss Parker. And Bernie just acting like, shit, corrupted, clergyman. He approaches his Miss Parker and stuff. And, so we already know what's finna go down. So soon after that though, we get excuse me, y'all. Like I said, I'm out here just walking, getting my exercise on. We get Hector. We get Hector to pull back up. Hector pulls back up in his lowrider, and Smokey still kind of treating Hector like he don't want to see him and stuff, and trying to disregard Hector. But now it's like Smokey needs the money. You know what I'm saying? Like he needs this $200 to give the Big Worm, or else. So he actually reluctantly sells Hector some weed. Hector buys some weed from him, because it's like at first he was gonna turn down Hector, and it was like Craig was like, you better go make that money, because shit, we owe Big Worm, keep in mind weed, because you involved me into it. So he sells the weed to Hector, and then shortly after that, we could see Miss Parker's husband coming home, right? We could see we see a car pulling in the driveway, and it's Miss Parker's husband. And keep in mind, Bernie Mac is in there, And so the husband is played by no other than Tony Cox. And we know Tony Cox, he's a little man, he's a little person, you know what I'm saying? And so Tony Cox goes in that house, and next thing we know, we see Bernie running out like in his underwear and nothing but a white beater, and he got his hat. He had like the church. He had his church hat in his hand, and had some socks, some church socks on, and that's all he had on. He just running out of the house, right? And he getting chased by Tony Cox, And it just, it's so funny, right? Because like I said, Tony Cox is a little man, you don't see that every day. So Bernie Mac is running out the house and he's yelling and screaming, and Tony Cox is chasing him, and Tony Cox pick up a brick and throws it through Bernie Mac's window as Bernie Mac is pulling off, and calls him the devil. And so we get that little funny scene. And after that, we could see Smokey kind of growing a little bit. He's starting to kind of realize like how serious this is with, trying to get Big Worm this money. And so Craig is even like, kind of joining in that paranoia. He gets we could see Craig girl pull back up, and they still playing that Hoochie Mama song by Too Loud Crew. Every time she pulls up, that's what they play. And so she pulls back up, and Craig is basically trying to get the money from her, trying to get the $200 from her. And so it seemed like he was gonna get the money from her, and then we get who? No other than Felicia. We get Felicia to pull in the background, and Felicia is basically like standing behind Craig and clapping at Craig, trying to get his attention. And Craig's girl notices that and be like, who is her? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you talking to her? And basically like that pisses Craig's girl off, and she sped off on him, and without giving him the money. So Felicia, basically fucked all that up, right? They could have probably had the money then. So that was a failed attempt. So so we get they go inside Craig's house. Smokey and Craig go inside Craig's house, and Debbie pulls up. Keep in mind, he alone. Debbie pulls up, and Debbie was basically sitting in there, and keep in mind, Craig is high. He done got high for the first time. Craig's still tripping out. Like, he's noticing like it's these little like dog statues, dog figurines that they got inside the house, and he think they actually barking at him. Like, Craig's so damn high that he think that the figurines is barking at him. So, Craig is high. I mean, he gone. And so, meanwhile, Smokey is trying to get a hookup from, he just trying to get a hookup, with any girl at this point. Debbie offers, Smokey to hook up with, her homegirl, with her homegirl that she know. And this homegirl, basically, he gets on the phone. Smokey gets on the phone with Debbie's homegirl, and we already know what happens. She basically gets to saying that, she was telling Smokey was wanting to know how she look and stuff, and the girl on the phone says that she look like Janet Jackson. So, ain't too many people that look like Janet Jackson. So it's like, okay, we have to wait to see what's gonna happen with that. So, Smokey done got him a hookup. We see. At least he think he do. So anyways, yeah, we get that to happen. And meanwhile, they still trying to get the money. And Craig even asks his sister, which is, played by Regina King in this movie. And he basically asks, Regina King, like, hey, can I borrow the money? And Regina tell him like, nope, you can't. Just basically just know like that. You can't have the money. And she lets the dad know. She let Craig's dad know that what kind of trouble they in. Because basically Craig was basically explaining the story like, hey, we owe Big Worm some money, and that if we don't pay him, that they gonna that he gonna kill us. And she could care less. Regina King could care less. She was like, no, like, I ain't letting you borrow nothing. Hey, you just gonna have to get killed or whatever. So, so she, Craig's sister basically turned him down for the money. And now, time done progress. We getting through the day. We getting through this whole day. And all this is happening in one day. It's on a Friday. That's why the movie is called Friday. And so we getting through the whole day, and it's we approaching nighttime. And we see we see a car pulling up. They go back outside on the porch. Craig and Smokey, they outside on the porch, and we see a car pulling up, and it's the woman. It's the woman that, you know, Smokey done, you know, got hooked up with. The one that says that she look like Janet Jackson. So Smokey approaches the car, you know, all happy. You know, he dancing to the car. He happy. You know, he thinking that, oh, I done got me something, you know. And this woman gets out the car, and, you know, it's the late Yvette Wilson. Yvette Wilson was in the last movie that I reviewed, which was Set It Off. And she basically played like she basically was kind of like, you know, associated with the guy that robbed the bank, you know, Lorenz, which is another guy that played in all the Hood movies. But she was basically in that movie too. But she approaches his in his car, and that's the this is the woman that Debbie hooked Smokey up with. So we kind of know what Yvette Wilson kind of looked like, right? You know, she's kind of heavy set in this movie. She's more heavy set in this movie, and she don't really have any hair. Matter of fact, she was wearing a hat. She was wearing a hat that had braids attached to it. So it wasn't really her hair. She didn't really have no hair. She was practically, like, you can almost say bald. So Smokey just looking all disappointed. You know, he looking all let down. And, you know, basically he got catfish, you know. But we would say, you know, back in the day, catfish wasn't a thing, but the term wasn't, but, you know, it was always there. So, yeah. Smokey done got catfish, you know, and he's all upset, you know. So he's so upset. He's so upset that he goes to confront Debbie at her house. And he was like, you know damn well that, you know, she was big bone. You know that she fat, you know that she didn't have no hair. I mean, he getting all in Debbie ass about it. You know, he was really upset about it, like, you're not getting, you know, put down with a, you know, something better, you know, with a girl that looked better. And so, yeah, so he gets all up in Debbie grill, and he finds out that Felicia is over there sleeping with Debo. And now this is the deal. Felicia and Debbie are sisters. They sisters, you know what I'm saying? But for some reason, we get the odd hookup of Felicia sleeping with Debo out of all the, like, things that can happen. So, really what it was, Smokey came up with the idea, because keep in mind, early in the movie, Debo stole the money out of Stanley house, which was, you know, $200, which is the money that Smokey need to be able to pay Big Worm. So he came up with the idea to steal the money away from Debo. So what he did was he broke in through Debbie's house, you know, I guess upstairs into the window, and we could see Felicia's sleeping with Debo. They both knocked out, and he tries to get the money out of Debo's pocket. And it's like he almost had it, right? And he probably would have had it if he wasn't clowning around. He over there playing with Debo's drawers and everything. I'm talking about, like, you know, just doing silly, goofy stuff. So I'm like, you know, he probably would have had the money if he had not been wasting time like that. But we get Ezell. Ezell is another character in this movie now. And Ezell, we could see probably is a crackhead. You know what I'm saying? Like, keep in mind, we don't see him doing crack, but the things that he was doing in this movie, like early in the movie, he fell down in a convenience store and try to act like, you know, he was going to be able to get a lawsuit out of it. Talking about, you know, I'm going to sue for, you know, I want, you know, $20,000, but we could settle in court for $10 or something like that. You know, he was just like, you know, he was on some crackhead shit. So we get him to show up. Ezell comes through the window trying to steal, you know, whatever he could. So that ruins everything, because Debo woke up and they was out. You know, as soon as Debo woke up, they was out. So that plan failed. So, so now they even, you know, Smokey is like, he's going back to Craig's house, and, you know, he's explaining that, you know, he almost had the money, and, you know, Ezell showed up, and, you know, whatever, you know. So now he's, you know, you could tell, like, Smokey's getting a little bit more desperate. He's getting more desperate. You know, you could tell, like, you know, it's really starting to set in that, hey, I got to have this money by the end of the day, or, you know, we dead. So Big Worm calls. And he asks Smokey, do he got the money yet? Before Smokey could even say no, Big Worm hangs up the phone, and all you hear is the dial tone. And, you know, we know what that means. It's like, no, Big Worm ain't playing no games. Like, That's it. Like, I done gave you chance after chance. That's it. So, now we have to go back to like an important part in this movie. Keep in mind the gun that Craig had pulled out on Smokey when he was basically coming through his window at the beginning of the movie when we got introduced to Smokey. Craig pulled out the gun later on, and Willie, his dad, came into his room as he had the gun in his hand. And Willie was like really thrown out by it, like, what's that for? You know, what you got a gun for? And Craig was like, well, you know, I need the gun to be able to walk, you know, Smokey across the street. And basically, you know, Willie was like, you know, old school approach. He was like, hey, you know, you don't need no gun. You know what I'm saying? If you settle something, you know, if you got a dispute with somebody, you need to settle something, you settle it by, you know, fighting with your fists. You don't settle it with no gun. And he was telling him like, hey, your uncle pulled out a gun and he got 20 years, you know. Well, he was 20 years old when he died, basically, you know, because of, you know, I guess he got shot, you know, but he was only 20 years old when he lost his life, you know, just from, you know, pulling out a gun. And it's like, hey, he was telling, you know, Craig, hey, you got the option. You know, you could put the gun down and fight like a man. You know what I'm saying? So he's telling, you know, he told Craig that. And so anyway, so that did happen. That happened, you know, and they had that exchange, you know, that fatherly son exchange about, you know, hey, you don't need weapons. You know, your fist is the only weapons that you need. You know what I'm saying? If you ever get into any trouble. So anyways, we get back to you know, we back at, you know, of course we still at Craig's house, and they go outside and they see a black car. They see a black car that was kind of, you know, creeping through, you know, just driving slowly through. And the car just drove through, didn't, you know, nothing, you know what I'm saying, didn't do nothing or nothing. So they went back in the house and kind of spent a little bit more time in the house. So they came back outside, and that's when they noticed a van. They noticed a van that was sitting out there parked in the middle of the street. And as soon as they came outside, the van turned on its headlights, and that's when they opened fire. That's when the van, you know, the people in the van started shooting at Craig and Smokey. And so they shooting, and, you know, they trying to get away. You know, they get into the back of a truck. They hide in the back of a truck. And like I said, you know, it was just, you know, open fire. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was at least like a good 2 minutes of them getting shot at. And, you know, we know who that was. That's, you know, Big Worm folks. You know what I'm saying? He wasn't playing no games. He sent the hit squad after them. So they hide in the back of a truck, and, you know, shortly after that, you know, the gunmen basically give up. You know, they didn't shoot nobody. And I don't know how, you know, I don't know how they didn't hit nobody, but they didn't hit Craig or Smokey, and so they made it out, you know. But that prompted everybody to come outside. Right? So we get the whole neighborhood outside after that. You know, after the shootout, we get the whole neighborhood outside after that. And so we get everybody out there, including Debo. Debo shows up out of nowhere, and he's sitting, you know, basically on the curb with Ezell, you know, the crackhead Ezell that goes around stealing everything and stuff. And so we could see Debbie coming down the street, and she got Felicia with her, and she's angry. You know, Debbie is angry because Felicia done allowed Debo to hit her, you know, basically hit her in the face, causing her to have a black eye. And we could see it. We could see Felicia coming in, you know, there with a black eye. And Debbie was like, you know, she wasn't scared of Debo. She was like, hey, you know, you hit my sister like she was a fucking man, you know. And it's like, you know, she got all up in Debo's face. And, you know, Debo was basically trying to, like, we could see that he was actually, I guess, trying to avoid hitting her, but he actually slaps Debbie. And he does that in front of everybody, including Craig. You know, Craig ain't putting up with that, though. Craig, you know, got a crush on Debbie. And so, you know, he stands up to Debo for Debbie. And basically what happens after that is that Craig pulls out the gun. Craig pulls out the gun in front of Debo, and he was about to shoot Debo. And then that's when we see the flashback of, Willie was basically telling his son, like, hey, you lose some, you win some. But you live to fight another day. He was just basically saying that because if you fight, you ain't gonna die. You ain't got to worry about dying if you don't involve guns. So we get that little flashback. And so the whole time, Willie is right there, Craig's daddy. He's trying to convince him to put the gun down, like, hey, put the gun down, son. Fight like a man, put that gun down. And so he hands the gun over to his dad. And that's when he, gets to fighting. That's when the fight breaks out. That's when he get to fighting Debo. And, Craig comes with some good shots. He came with some good shots, but we could see Debo was getting the upper hand, right? Bigger, stronger. He's hitting Craig with a lot of, things, with some, devastating blows. So, at first it was seeming like, Debo was just going to win the fight and, carry on. But we could see, Craig, hey, he had that sucking win, and Craig put himself right back in the fight. He started making a comeback. Craig started picking up whatever he could see. He started picking up trash cans, hitting Debo over the head with it. He started picking up whatever he could see. And then we get to the point where Craig actually picks up a brick. He picks up a brick, and he chunks it right at Debo's face. And they got to hurt. He chunked the brick at Debo's face and hit Debo, square in the face with it. And that's when he got the upper hand. And, basically, he delivered the devastating blow, the final shot that knocked him out, that knocked Debo out. And so, everybody kind of congratulating Craig because, he basically stood up to the neighborhood bully. We could tell that, did nobody like Debo, where nobody fucking with Debo because he go around, fucking with everybody else. So, he knocks out, Craig knocks out Debo, and, Smokey over there celebrating, talking about, that's my dog, that's my dog, and all that. And so, we could see Red. And then Willie, Willie is he's a proud father. He's happy that, Craig didn't use the gun, and he just, he chose to fight him like a man. And so, we could see Red approach, and Debo's knocked out, right? Red, it looked like Debo was finna come to, and Red knocked him right back out. And what Red did, he took his chain back that Debo had stole from him earlier, and he also got his bike back. So, Red got his revenge, you know what I'm saying? He was able to get, his things back. So he's celebrating, Red all happy. And even Smokey came over there, and delivered the classic line, you got knocked the fuck out, and he took the money away from Debo. He actually got the, $200 out of his pocket. So now he got the money, right? He got the money to pay Big Worm. And so we could see Debbie, Craig don't earn the respect from, Debbie naturally, standing up for her like that, and knocking Debo out and, fighting for her. So he don't earn the respect and earn her. And she was like, hey, I'm going to be over there, tomorrow, like, basically he gonna, they was gonna hook up in the morning. And so, so Craig got, he was able to get Debbie. And we could see at the end of the movie that we could see Smokey on the phone talking to Big Worm. And Smokey was saying like, hey, I got your money, but I'm through with this. I ain't gonna be selling no weed no more, nothing like that. Matter of fact, I ain't even gonna be smoking no more. He talking about that, Smokey over here talking about I'm going to rehab, for weed. So, Big Worm was like, hey, it's the principality of, what I had to, I done had to tell you too many times, Smokey. You was playing with my emotions, that classic line. Everybody still use that to today. And so, Smokey was like, whatever, I'm through with it. You know what I'm saying? You could have it. And he hung up. Soon as he hang up the phone with Big Worm, he lights up another joint. So we know he, and then he delivers the classic line, I was just bullshitting. And this, man. And he looks right into the camera, and that's the end of the movie. You know what I'm saying? While he lighting up a joint. So we could see, Smokey still smoking. He's still going to do him. But that's basically where we at. That's the classic movie Friday. I'm glad to take y'all on this ride with me, like I said, as I get my exercise, because I'm getting some good exercise out here. I don't walk, I done got my steps in for sure. And I encourage people to do that, you know, stay active, you know what I'm saying? Like, especially as you get older, you know, just stay active, you know, even if it's just walking around, you know, outside and, you know, your block or whatever, you know, just stay active and do something. Don't just be in the house all day and not, you know, not getting any type of exercise, you know. Just, you know, get up for a minute, you know, and just walk. And I decided to do that, you know, because I needed it. I said, man, you know, I like to, you know, I'm one of the people that try to stay active and take care of my body. So, like, I always try to encourage people to do the same. But that's the classic movie, Friday. Like I say, everybody know it. It's like you laugh all through the movie. It got some serious points in there, but it's a comedy. It's a comedy for sure, you know. You stay laughing more than anything in this movie, you know, watching this. And like I said, they got so many memorable quotes, you know, like I didn't mention, like, you know, bye Felicia. Like, people still say that to this day. Like, you know, when they was like when they got tired of Felicia being around, they was like, bye Felicia. And so, like, people still say that to this day, you know what I'm saying? Like, just a whole bunch of stuff people still say, you know, he gonna cry in the car, you know, all them classic lines that we still use. We done got from this movie that came out in 95, because Friday came out in 95. It was, like I said, it was kind of right before Money Talks, but I think they did Fifth Element right after Friday. So it was in between, Fifth Element was in between Friday and then Money Talks. But yeah, it came out in 95 and still, you know, relevant to this day. People still watch it all the time. You could call it like a, you know, stoner movie. It relates to, like, you know, anything that, you know, that you want to do, you know what I'm saying? So, classic movie. And, you know, like I said, if you like the review, just give me a like and, you know, subscribe to my channel. You know what I'm saying? We're gonna keep on, you know, coming out with, you know, these classics, and we ain't gonna stop. You know, I'm gonna keep going. And, you know, I hope everybody take care of themselves. Peace.